Good morning. The word for you today. Today is Friday, December 8th, and our devotion today is the third part of moving from failure to success. Our scripture passage today comes out of the book of Psalms, chapter 3, and I'm going to be reading the preface and then through verse 6, or through verse 4, which says, "A psalm of David when he fled from Absalom his son. O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God." And then it says Selah, which means rest. It's a pause. "But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill." Selah. So, what is this about? Well, first things first, this is in the first book of Psalms, which is really depressing. The first part of the Psalms are all about the mundanity of life, the sadness of life, the despair that can be brought about. There are some praise psalms here, but all of these, or most of these, are written by a psalmist who is under stress. In this case, this is David fleeing from Absalom after the tragedy that is most of David's life. And so what we see here is we see that David is calling out to the Lord to ask him for forgiveness, but most importantly, to ask him for salvation. He's asking God to save him. And so saving has this very interesting context. What he's saying is for him to deliver him from this evil. It calls back to this imagery of God delivering Israel out of Egypt, or delivering Israel into the promised land, of bringing victory against the different tribes of the ancient past, of God calling Samuel and bringing Samuel forth from the womb. All of these are God saving or delivering the people of Israel, or people in Israel, from harms of the world. So, moving from failure to success. How does that go with this? I think it's pretty simple. David's personal life was kind of a disaster. I don't know if you've read much of the Bible. I don't know if you've read much of the narrative of King David's life, but we tend to kind of idealize David. We tend to say David is a man after God's own heart, which is kind of wrong, but that's just because we're misunderstanding what those words are actually saying. But what we tend to think of David as is we think of David as this lowly shepherd boy who God rose to prominence as a king and was holy and devout to the Lord. The problem with that is that's just not who David was. Yes, David was a shepherd boy. Yes, David was lifted into the position of king by God. But David was also a man who cheated on his wife, who committed adultery and murdered one of his best friends. David was a man who didn't protect his family, and in doing so caused his daughter tremendous pain. David was a man who was ousted from his own kingdom by his son, and eventually had to kill his own son, or have his own son killed. That's not the mark of a successful person in my mind. That's not what I think of when I think of success. And yet, we still view David as this overwhelmingly positive experience and this overwhelmingly positive person in the story of Jesus and in the story of God's interventions on earth. And the reason for that, I think, is because despite the failures of David, he still had God. And because of that, those failures, what was meant for evil, God used for good. So I ask you, what are your failures? What are your moments where you, like David, completely miss the mark? What are the moments in your life where you resemble David? And what are the moments when you resemble the people in David's life who may have tried to warn David that what he was doing was wrong? Acknowledge those failures, but trust that God, in his infinite mercies, is big enough to handle those failures and to help us turn those failures into success. Have a nice day.